The Appalachian Mountain Range encompasses a vast portion of the eastern United States up into eastern Canada. With its many plateaus, valleys, and hollers, stories of strange creatures sprung up within the communities that called them home. Tonight, we highlight some of the strange stories and mysterious legends from the Appalachian region with author Mark Muncy and illustrator Kari Schultz. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another wonderful episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities Presents the Hometown Haunts podcast. I am your host, Kat Loco, and tonight with me in the shadows, as always, are Christina, Wald, and Jen Kohler. Actually, they're not in the shadows, they're forth right now, unmuted, and for everyone to see if you're following our YouTube channel. So, hey, ladies.
Hey.
Hello.
So, for everyone who wants to follow us on social media, you can find us at Sin Cabinet Curio on Twitter, at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram, and of course, we're dying to hear your stories of the strange and paranormal from your neck of the woods. So please send them into hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. I know that is running below me right now, just like a ticker tape on the YouTube channel, but also for those of you who want to know where it is, it's in the show notes, like all this information is. Christina lovingly puts it there every single week. You can also join us on our Facebook group, Hometown Haunts, where we have all sorts of chatty people, just like myself and all of you wonderful folk, talking about their hometown haunts and sharing them with everyone in real time. We're an official podcast that can be heard wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you, Jen. And if you want to see us while we're doing the show, like I've mentioned before, just like a minute ago, you can watch the video feed on YouTube. Find us by searching Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities or Hometown Haunts. You can find us at both. And please rate and review us there so other spooky history lovers just like yourself can find us. Link, of course, is in the show notes. And of course, we have some show news. Hey, we're here. It's been like what, 6 weeks?
It's been a while.
It's been a while because Christina, you're back stateside. Tell us about
Yes.
your adventures in the land of vampires.
Yes. Well, I was just in Romania. As you know, one of my good friends, I was in her wedding in 1998. And for years, we've been saying, let's do a sketching trip to Romania. It doesn't seem like the most obvious thing with all the Dracula mythos that comes around Romania, but I'm an avid urban sketcher. So not only did we get to see Dracula's castle and go to a lot of citadels and castles, as you know, I'm a castle addict. So
Mm-hmm.
even though I'm satiated for castles right now, it's like, taking heroin. I'm going to be going through withdrawal soon and want to go back and see more castles.
We got the Loveland Castle. You can just stare at it.
I know. I just need to go to the Loveland Castle.
They just
Um,
added a greenhouse. So,
And actually, that's where I saw the most Americans was when we were at Bran Castle, which is allegedly where Vlad the Impaler. He never actually lived there, but they have done with Bran Castle what I said they should have done years ago. When I first went in 2014, it was mostly centered on Romanian history. You would go there, and not that there's anything wrong with Romanian history, but most people that go to Bran Castle want to know about Dracula and Vlad the Impaler. And at the time I said, they ought to do a lot more folklore stuff and have things about ghosts. And they have done that. The Bran Castle was bought several years ago, and the new owners have added a lot of really cool folklore and homages to Vlad the Impaler and Dracula. And even though most Romanians would say Dracula has nothing to do with them, Bram Stoker was British and
true.
just placed it in Romania because it sounded exotic. It does get a lot of tourists, and that's the only place we really saw many Americans was at Bran Castle. But there's a beautiful town next to it called Brashov, and we spent some time there sketching. And one thing that I did, so we kind of went through Transylvania. We stayed at several towns there and met with some locals. One of the coolest places you can visit in Romania is called Sighișoara, and it is this old citadel that was built, I want to say, like in the 1500s. And I got a children's book that is translated and talks about all the different tragedies that have happened in Sighișoara. And when I say that's its history, because Romania is sort of a crossroads of invasions and that sort of thing. So there's been a lot of invasions from Austria and invasions from Turkey and invasions from Hungary, and a lot of those areas were are still contested. I mean, if you were following what happened with Bosnia and Croatia and that sort of thing, which are their neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a really interesting place to visit. They have all these towers that were built by the different guilds, and it has this wonderful medieval flair. So for a castle-phile like me, it was really exciting. And I got to sketch with different artists there, and that was
Yeah.
fun. We hung out with artists in Sighishuara and in Bucharest, and they were all very friendly, and we drew together and drank together and had a lot of fun.
That sounds good. I know on Instagram, which say what your Instagram handle is for people so they can check out the photos and all the sketches.
CSW Yellow Cat, spelled YELLOKAT. Don't ask why it's spelled that way. It's because I don't want to get into that discussion.
It's just the way it is. But
it's just the way it is. They were
check it
saying
out.
don't
You
use
can
your real
see
name back then.
all of your sketches. They're wonderful sketches, and all
thanks.
all the towns and the people. Like, I like the photos of you with other urban sketchers from around Romania, and that's just all fun. So
I know, it's really exciting.
Yes.
And I brought back this thing that we went to this monastery. So most of Romania is Christian Orthodox. It's not. There is a little bit of Catholic from when the Habsburgs were in charge in Hungary. So you see some places where you'll have the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholic churches next to each other. But we went to this really unusual mix of architectural styles called the Curtea de Argeș. I'm not sure. I need to learn conversational Romanian if I'm going to be visiting there a lot. But
yeah, that may be good.
Yes, and it's.
Though I will say it's better than mine. So
one thing that Ioana mentioned about it that I thought was fascinating was she said that, and I didn't know if this was an old folklore or if this is old pagan folklore, but she was talking about this, chapel which has their royal family buried when it was first built. She said a lot of buildings have to be considered to have a soul, and so they have a sacrifice to them. So the legend is that one of the builders, and it says that it's the center of a popular Romanian legend, and one of the construction workers, Manole, saw all day his work being destroyed at night. In the end, he sacrificed his wife by burying her alive inside the walls. Now, you all are into true crime. I don't know if that would stand up. But they claim that she was buried in the walls and that gave the building a soul. But they said they've x-rayed the building and can't find her bones. So it was just one of those one-off things that Ioana said, and I was like, what kind of legend is this? Oh, we think our building should have a soul. And
that's some dark black magic
so.
to be putting into a church.
It was a very interesting,
in my opinion.
I mean, there's a lot of really interesting folklore type things. And unfortunately, we weren't there for the solstice, but they have a lot of solstice celebrations. And it's interesting because a lot of people talked about that movie Midsommar. Jen and I saw it in the theater. And actually, a lot of the design was taken from Romanian folklore, not from Swedish folklore.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so we're hoping to do another tour. We some of the Romanian sketches are really excited about like helping us plan some different locations and that sort of thing. So
I definitely want to go.
Yeah, it was really exciting.
Yeah.
Big old houses, yes. Big old castles, double yes. Yes.
Yeah. And plus
graveyards, I am sold.
And plus the most bears in Europe. Like I forget what the number is, and I'll try to put it in the show notes, but I think there's supposed to be 7,000 bears in Europe, and 6,000 of them are in Romania because there's a lot of old growth forest there that for some reason, and they're trying to keep it now from getting all logged. Right. But when we were going to Brashov, you know how you get those Amber alerts on your phone? Yes. We got a bear alert.
So what do you do when you get the bear alert? Do you run and hide or go indoors? I think bears can open doors, can't they?
You stay in your car. You give them a picnic basket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I could talk about Romania for hours. We have some very special guests today. But
Yes.
first, we have some show notes.
Some show notes, some show news. We are actually taking a summer break. I know we have been gone for several weeks and we're doing this episode, and then we'll be gone again. So we'll be doing limited shows in July and August, but we're coming back in September with some very fun guests, some returning hopefully from earlier last year. So please continue to send us our stories, however. That's at hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com, and we would love to read them at the end of episodes. Your own personal ghost stories, cryptid stories, UFO sightings from around your neck of the woods. Like I stress, you don't have to be from Cincinnati to listen to this show, because we talk about fringe history, and Cincinnati is weird enough for the world. Yes. So, all right, with that, I am opening up my book. I have a book, guys and ladies, and non-binary pals. It's a book. I'm so happy. So I am going to be reading from this book about our wonderful guests tonight. So Mark Muncy is an author of horror and science fiction. He has spent more than 3 decades collecting ghostly tales and reports of legendary beasts. Have you heard of my uncle? He's on the west side. He's really hairy, has the same color hair as I do, but he's about 5 foot tall, and some call him a grass man. Anyway, he has previously written 3 books for the History Press, including Creepy Florida, Eerie Florida, and Freaky Florida. He is a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM, Nerd Talk Live, Drinking with Authors, and Into the Fray Radio. He is a commenter and collaborator on numerous programs, including Expedition X, Sasquatch Chronicles, Road Trips with Ripley's, and many more TV and radio shows, including this one now. Ha ha ha. Anyway, he can be found hosting the online show Eerie Travels. He lives in St. Petersburg, Florida, on the remains of an ancient shell maiden with his wife, Kari Schultz. Occasionally, he is visited by his children, and when they remember that he is still there. You can find out more about he and his work at eerieflorida.com. Now on to Kari. Kari Schultz is an illustrator at Fox Dream Studio who enjoys drawing cute and creepy creatures. She has been working on art as long as she can remember and reading folklore and horror for almost as long. She has illustrated several books of legends and monsters for History Press, including Eerie Florida, Eerie Alabama, Eerie New Mexico, Creepy Florida, and Freaky Florida. She has a thing for foxes. When not drawing, she is the caretaker of her baby dragon named Claudius and her python, Missy, Pajamas, and Thulsa Doom. She also raises jumping spiders and tarantulas. She can be lured forth from her home with poke bowls or pasta. We have provided, I would like to say poke bowls, because we have these 2 wonderful people on tonight. So bring them from the shadows, if you would please, Christina, as we welcome Mark and Kari to our show. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. This will be so fun.
Oh, thank you for having us. And I am so jealous, Christina. I haven't been to Romania since 1989.
Ooh.
Oh my gosh, that was like Ceausescu's.
It was communist Romania still. And it was right at the fall. And I had to go through the Berlin Wall. I had to go through Checkpoint Charlie. And I was just out of high school. And I was a tourist going to Romania. And man, I got interviewed by the KGB. It was because they're like, "Why are you going to Romania?" And I wanted to tell them, "Well, I want to look at Dracula's castle," but they didn't understand what a nerd was. So I said, "Oh, I have family there." So it was just I'm looking up my family history, and they were like, "Oh, okay." So I have Romani, blood there. So it was.
Oh, that's awesome.
We were chasing encampments, and but it was insane. I can only imagine now where there's actually tourism and stuff. So
well, Ioana and I have started this travel business. So if you ever want to go on one of our trips, let me know.
Oh, we would be happy.
We're going to start doing it regularly. She actually was in the square when they deposed Ceausescu, and she is she grew up in communist Romania, and she immigrated to Cincinnati, I think in 1994 or 5. Wow. And we were in their wedding in 1998 in Romania.
Nice. Wow. It was a beautiful place, and I remember Neudorf very well. I remember Bucharest very well, and we went to Castle Bran, and then as I was in Castle Bran, I was like, okay, so this is what Bram Stoker wrote about, because Dracula's castle was just ruins, And I understand now there's actually rope, so you can actually not fall off the mountain getting to Dracula's castle.
Romania is unrecognizable from what you saw in 1989.
I can only imagine.
It joined the EU and NATO in 2007, I believe. And as a matter of fact, it's changed dramatically since I was there in 2014. It's had billions of dollars of development from the EU and Germany. And so the roads are nice. They're rebuilding a lot of the castles. They are, I mean, everything looks amazing. So it's a really interesting place to visit.
It's fantastic. I remember camping out in the ruins of Dracula's real castle up on the top of that mountain, and we just had a tent unrolled in what's left of walls, and they were just starting to rebuild a turret. I guess they were going to restore it, because I think even then the communists were like, "Hey, there's this thing called tourism, and it might work." But I remember digging a little bit of dirt and putting in a little glass coffin that I had brought with me that I'd bought in London.
Oh, that's awesome.
I had Dracula's dirt with me for forever, and it got shattered a number of years ago, but that was always sad. But that was definitely a great trip.
I think it's going to be a huge tourist destination because it's not that touristy yet, and there's tons of castles and citadels, and right now the dollar's super strong, so it's an argument for going there. So we're hoping to do 1 or 2 tours a year into different areas, and there's just so much interesting architecture in the whole country. So
I remember being addicted to paprika hendel, which was just paprika chicken, which was every meal was just baked chicken with paprika all over it. I loved it.
Oh, wow. I don't know if I even saw that on the menu. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Romania. Like I said, I could talk all day. Let's talk about your book.
Yes. So,
Kari, do you want to talk about the book, or do you want me to talk?
Well, you're the storyteller.
Yes. And all right, so
we will ask about the illustrations too. Don't worry.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. They'll get to that. They're artists, so
yeah.
But yeah, we do myths, monsters, legends, ghosts, dark history. I ran a haunted attraction down here in St. Petersburg, Florida, for 20 years called Hellview Cemetery. And we based it all on local lore and legends. So instead of having a werewolf jump out at you, we had the skunk ape jump out at you. And instead of having, some random vampire, we had this notorious bordello owner in Tampa called Madame Orr from the Boathouse, or the Orr House, as it was called. So we turned her in from dusk till dawn type thing and all that. So we ran that for a long time. And then and we posted the stories on our website. And after a little while, we got shut down by the city because we had 10,000 people a weekend coming through my backyard, which is, probably not the best thing. It was all for charity. It was all for a good cause. But we had this pile of stories. And at that point, we published them, and we were selling a little self-print book at the haunted house. But we were approached by History Press to go out and find the real history behind these things. And I'm like, oh, real history? Twist my arm. History buff, I can do that. And that became Eerie, Florida. And when that became a bestseller, they were like, oh, you have all these extra stories. Let's keep doing more books, please. And so we did Freaky Florida and Creepy Florida after that. And we were writing a 4th book that was another Florida book. But I was doing one incident, of a UFO incident down in Florida called the Crestview Sighting. And this was a 1952 incident near Miami, where a bunch of kids outside of an elementary school saw their school was buzzed. And there were hundreds of witnesses. This lasted over 2 days. And students, teachers, all age groups saw this. And then the military came down and interviewed all the witnesses. So they really treated it seriously. One of the kids said, oh, they kind of hovered like helicopters. So the newspaper said, it was helicopters. And it just kind of disappears. It doesn't become Roswell or anything. It's just gone. It's this deep history thing. And suddenly, the year 2000s hit. My books have hit, and social media has risen. And then the Navy announces, hey, UFOs are kind of real, and now we got government hearings on it and stuff for the first time in 50 years.
Yep.
And I've been approached by some of those witnesses. Now, these were kids in the 1950s and now in their 70s and older. And a lot of them are talking for the first time going, hey, this is what we saw. It was what we call a tic tac now, and all this. It was not a helicopter. We weren't crazy. So I got to go down and interview this one particular guy, and he thankfully had this treasure. It was a diary that his father had kept with names and phone numbers. It was like an address book that he would have kept by the front door. And he had the names of the 3 military men who came and interviewed his son at his home. And I'm thinking, Freedom of Information Act, I might be able to find some real information and tie this together. And what was cool was the first one was was like a Captain Smith from the Air Force. Not going to help me much. The next one was a Captain Sinclair from the Coast Guard. Now that was a little more obscure, so I was thinking, all right, good things. And then the third name came up, and it just said Government Man, and then the name was Cold.
Oh,
yes. See, those in the know suddenly go, what? And that's exactly with me. Goosebumps up and down the arms. I'm staring at the page, and I was like, do you know what you have? And the guy's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, this is the most priceless thing for a UFO expert ever. And I'll let y'all in on the secret here in a minute for those who are curious. Yes. But Kat there knows exactly what's going on in my head. So I had to explain to this gentleman who Indrid Cold was. And I'm putting the timetable in my head. I'm like, wait a minute. So this was 6 months after the Derenberger incident near Parkersburg, West Virginia. They introduced the world to Indrid Cold. This is 6 months later. And he's suddenly possibly in Miami, Florida, working with the government. This is a crazy thing. So suddenly, to write my next Florida book, I was going to have to include a chapter on Indrid Cold. Well, if I'm going to write about Indrid Cold, I got to write about Mothman. If I'm going to write about Mothman, I've got to write about Flatwoods and Grafton and all this. Yep. And then there was another tie to the Flatwoods monster incident with a thing that happened in Tampa that we had also discovered. And so it was like, oh my gosh, this. So I tell the publisher, I'm like, hey, this next Florida book's going to have, a third of it's going to be about West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio. And they're like, okay, well, why don't you just do that book? And we're like, okay. And then I can do the Florida book and tie back in. So that's where this came about. Then, of course, 2020 happened and the world ended. And we couldn't do all the interviews and the trips and all the things we had planned. And a lot of the people we were interviewing were in retirement homes, old folks homes. Yeah. A lot of this stuff was, 1950s, 1960s. And, we didn't want to be spreading the disease everywhere. So we're like, okay, we can't wipe out a generation of UFO first, witnesses and stuff.
Thank you for your consideration. That would have been very bad.
So it delayed us, but it let us expand the scope. And thanks to Zoom and thanks to the world, expanding, we were able to get a lot more done than we originally intended. And then we were able to expand it all along the Appalachian Trail. By doing so, that let Kari draw lots of fun monsters. Yes. And we would go back to original witnesses, original sightings, and we would look at the original descriptions, not, the artist interpretation of the artist interpretation and, or the newspaper sketch that was done to sensationalize the newspaper. And then we would also,
newspaper sketches are terrible.
Oh, they're especially for these monsters. Flatwoods is probably the most famous because it was done by a New York television crew, and he's got the big arms and he's got the big dress and big head, and it looks great. And the poor witness is like, yeah, that's exactly what we saw. And then she later said, no, if you look at her original description, nowhere does it say arms. Nowhere does it say eyes. It says like portholes and a lizard-like face looking through. It's a completely different description. So Kari got to have a lot of fun with that. And so that's what we went back to. And so that was what we were having fun with. Plus, it let me go back to mountain because I'm originally from Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, that little tri-state area. So I was returned to my home. Kari's a Florida native.
I'm a Floridian, so that's his stomping grounds. But I was happy to get out of Florida.
and you had some time in Jersey, so she got to return to her favorite monster. So
yeah. So we don't keep them on suspense too long. Who is Indrid Cold?
Okay, so Indrid, so there's a man named Woody Derenberger, is a salesman in a big like panel truck in the 1952, and he's driving home to his home near Parkersburg, West Virginia. He's right along the Ohio West Virginia border on the interstate there, and he sees this car zip past him, and it's being chased by what he described as like a kerosene lamp flying, turned on its side, and giant thing, and it pulls in front of him. The other car just keeps going, and then it slows down in front of him, so he has to pull over to the side of the road, and it basically pulls him over. This flying saucer type craft, a cylinder. We would call it a cigar shaped thing now, but with like a bulb in it. And it lands next to him, and out steps this man in a shining suit, and he smiles at him and tells him, please roll down your window, and says, hello, my name is Indrid Cold, and I mean you no harm. I am a traveler. I am here to gather information. I want to know things. And he proceeds to interrogate him for like 20 minutes, asking him all these questions, and Derenberger's just answering everything he can. The thing is, he's never opens his mouth. He just smiles at him. He's telepathically communicating. Now, other cars drive by and see this and report it. So it's not just one guy making up a story that he got pulled over in the middle of nowhere near West Virginia. Then anyway, he gets home and tells his wife what happened. The big thing is Derenberger said when he was done, Indrid tells him, thank you, we will see you again, and goes back to his ship, and another hand reaches out and pulls him in. So there's two in the craft, and then flies away. Now, Indrid had been seen a few other times around then, kind of loosely, kind of vaguely, seen in New Jersey by a bunch of kids, seen in another place. He didn't really make much buzz at the time. It hit the local papers, and they did recording an interview with him. But John Keel, who comes down to that area to investigate the Mothman sightings just shortly thereafter, he's thrilled with Indrid Cold's story, and he's obsessed with it. So he ties Indrid to Mothman, and so there's the big scene in Mothman Prophecies where he's getting called by Indrid Cold, which we don't know if that really happened. That's John Keel, It's just the nature of the business. But now I had evidence that Indrid Cold, who's basically one of the first men in black, suddenly working for the government down in a Miami sighting 6 months after his initial appearance. Now that man who I talked to is a government employee still. He's an elected official. So he doesn't want his name publicized or anything like that. And he doesn't want that paper out, but he let me take a picture of it, and he will release it when he's ready. If he doesn't get reelected in the fall, it'll be coming out very quickly. But if he does get reelected, well, maybe 4 more years. But we're going to keep our eyes on things. But he knows what it is now, and he understands the importance of that paper. So, but we were able to tie the story in and put that into this book. So, so that's how we talked about Indrid, and that there's Indrid for you. He's a crazy character, and there's a lot to him. So
yeah, it's. I do wonder when I listening to the Petersburg, the West Virginia case, if Indrid Cold was already a Men in Black trying to catch somebody who may have seen something and ended up getting derailed talking to the salesman. If that's a possibility, it's interesting.
Go anyway. And now we talked to Tanya Derenberger, who is the daughter of Woody, who was the original person, and she has written a couple books called Beyond Lanulus, which is the planet Indrid is supposedly from, and how Woody had gone back and forth to that planet several times with Indrid. And so she too talks about her visits with him and how he still watches her family and stuff to this day. And she's an amazing person too, and she lives right up there by you all, up near Cincinnati.
Oh,
so and you know, should talk to her sometime. She's awesome.
that sounds nice.
That would
Yeah.
be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, Indrid Cold was interesting, and it's been a long time since I read anything about him until the book, and I was like, oh yeah, I think it feels like original Unsolved Mysteries level of age since I've heard
it's a crazy
much about
story. What's amazing is you know, the Mothman Museum in Point Pleasant has the original Derenberger recordings from the initial interviews still on the reel-to-reels, you know, preserved there, which is, you know, amazing to see. So
Yeah.
Amongst all the other incredible artifacts they have at that place. So.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so you do talk a lot about Mothman, and I know our listeners have heard a lot about Mothman. So we're going to save Mothman for anyone who wants to purchase the book. You can read all about that, and we're going to move on to the Grafton monster, if you don't mind.
Oh, not at all.
I know it's just a little bit of a jump, but
no, it's fine. That's you know, and that's honestly the reason, you know, we're doing this book is, you know, I really, when we started, it was all the major ones we wanted to hit. We wanted to hit Mothman. We wanted to hit, Indrid. The things we needed to tie, Flatwoods, we needed to tie in to these things. And then, and so of course that meant Grafton had to be in there. Loveland had to be in there.
Loveland.
Loveland
is also in there.
Yep. We had to put the major ones, but one of our favorite things is finding the bit more obscure. And Grafton, he's becoming more famous, but he's kind of the redheaded stepchild of the cryptid monsters, because he only had one major sighting at one point. And it wasn't until more recent sightings that we felt, okay, there is more to him now. The Grafton monster sighting is, you know, it's classic. He's a reporter. He's coming home from work, and he's driving, and he sees what he thinks is a rock slide, you know, that he hadn't seen on his way to work. So he stops to report on it because he's a reporter.
Curiosity.
Yep.
All reporters.
And then it moves. You know, this rock slide, suddenly he realizes it's not rock. It's like a seal, like a wet seal, a slick surface. And then he looks at it, and it's got like a sunken head and weird big shoulders. And I mean, the original descriptions basically describe it as what would be a kind of a hairless Sasquatch, similar to some of the Mothman appearances, similar to things like that. So it's this unusual creature with a strange face, strange, you know, movement to it. It gets out, and of course, the entire town turns out the next day to hunt the monster. It's they came and they investigated it. They just found some crushed grass, some unusual things, but you know, could be anything. And it kind of, then the next couple weeks later, he has to write a retraction, right? Oh, it was, I don't know what I was talking about. It was, I obviously saw something that I didn't understand. Forget about it. Just pretend it doesn't exist. But then years pass and people do see it again. It's just not recorded well. People ignore it. People pushed it away. It didn't get in the paper again because the paper didn't want to be a laughing stock again. But some places did document it. So we were able to find some further down the line sightings that most people don't talk about. The plus side is that it's been seen recently. And you know, like in the early 2000s. So again, a guy in the same general area, not too close, say a few miles away, saw something that he couldn't describe that looked very gray, slick. He described it as a hairless gorilla. And then when you compare that description with original Grafton description, suddenly it makes a little more sense. And so he just thought it was a hairless escaped gorilla. And and again, would have been a blip anywhere else, but the fact that it's near Grafton, suddenly you look into it.
And I wanted to point out the illustrations, Carrie, that you did both for the Grafton monster, which is one reason why I wanted to talk about it, because it's very noticeable. It feels like you drew something that should have been an X-Men. And I like it a lot. And also that you do a good illustration of Indrid Cold as well in the book.
Thank you. I was really trying to like have a weird feeling to it, but would not make him look too weird, because everyone really over exaggerates his smile and gives him like the Joker smile, and that's not
like
really...
a Glasgow smile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And none of the original descriptions say that. They all just say he smiled.
But he was just like overly friendly.
Very cordial smile. I did like the one person described him as having what was it? Norman Osborn hair from the comics. And so this was a 1960s description of him.
Yeah.
So suddenly we were looking back up Jack Kirby 1960s Norman Osborn hair for it. So we had to pull that up, which was fun. So
yeah, just like over enthusiastic Midwesterner should have been how it was described. Yes. Just like
We'll definitely show your image here. So
and now he's called the Grinning Man in some, according to creepypastas and SCPs, as they like to exaggerate the stories and continue them. It's always fun.
I will say that I don't think this is related to the Smiley Man killer. No. I think those are two different things.
Agreed.
No.
Yeah. Agreed.
There are two of those also.
Yeah.
Smiley face killers. Yeah.
There's two Bunny Mans, and there's two. We have a character down here in St. Pete called the Dancing Ghost, and people associate him with the Smiling Dancer, and it's like they're two completely different things. It's
Yeah. So yeah, you do talk about the Loveland Frogman, and also you visited all these locations as well. You're not doing armchair research. You visited. All the photos are either illustrations provided by Kari or they're photos provided by you, Mark. I love that. As a former anthropologist, I really love that when people are going out and interviewing and into the field and going to the places and meeting the people. So what did you think of, have you ever been to Loveland Castle before? What did you think about it?
I had been as a child when I grew up. I grew up in the Dayton area for a few years. Down Carlisle, Middletown, and then in the 70s. And my dad was a vice president for Greyhound out of Dayton, and then he resituated to Charleston, West Virginia. So I knew every little bus stop everywhere because I would ride around with my dad. It was just what we did. So I got to know all these little towns and all the weird places. And Loveland, I knew for the castle. I honestly didn't know about the frogs at the time when I was a kid. Man, I can imagine I would have lived for that back then. But I just knew our little monsters, from our HOLLER and our family land in Kentucky. So, and I knew Bigfoot and, and Nessie because of In Search Of and all that at the time. And, and that's what we knew back then. And, there wasn't this thing called the internet. But, then reading about Loveland over the years and like, I got to get back up there. And I had vague memories of the castle. I think at the time, I don't think it was finished the last time I had been there when I was a kid.
Probably not.
Which had been early 70s.
Yeah, it got finished in 83, 82.
Yeah, so that would have been, I don't ever remember being finished, but I remember now when we drove to it, it was amazing. And there was a wedding going on the day we were there, and then Kari didn't make it to that one. So she was.
We have to go back. There's still.
Yeah, there was. There were a couple of days she was taking care of baby spiders and couldn't drive with, so I had to go on a couple of the runs on my own. So, but that one was cool because I got to talk to the guy. That was when I learned about the ghost in the castle. That the guy who had created it, but also some of the artifacts that he had brought in had things attached. So there are several ghosts there now.
There are.
Which goes off in a whole different direction for that story. So, but the frogmen are that's an amazing story. A businessman sees this creature on the side of the road, big reptilian critter, 2 or 3 feet tall. He follows it over the guardrail, and then it meets 2 others and he's watching it. Then he makes some noise, and one of them pulls a wand on him, a magic wand.
I love that wand.
It. And then he runs because the wand shoots sparks at him, and then it's forgotten about, and then 10 years later, 20 years later,
20.
Almost?
It was
77. Yep. A cop in the same area sees a giant frog creature, and he follows it over the guardrail, and it jumps into the water, and he reports it, and then suddenly it's back, and everybody's talking about the Loveland Frogman. And again, suddenly his buddy, another cop, a week later, to calm things down, oh, it was just an iguana with no tail, and I shot it, and it's dead now. So stop worrying about it. Well, where's the body? Oh, no, I threw it away. It was disgusting. It was gross. So,
yeah.
So, what did they see? Did they debunk it? No, they were clear in his buddy's name. So they both recanted, and then both later on both said the recant was a fake. So it's deathbed confessions are always exciting.
No, yeah,
but the plus side is recently, right before the book went to press, after I had made my trip up there, I met a few paranormal teams, and a paranormal team reached out to me and said that they had gone to investigate the ghosts. And while they were investigating ghosts, something unusual jumped out of the forest at them. He's like, I can't swear it was what it was, but it looked like a giant reptile on two legs, and it jumped into the water not far from the castle. And so now he's like, I saw a frogman. I'm pretty sure I saw a frogman.
Yeah, it's because the Loveland Castle is right on the Little Miami River.
Right.
Like when it floods, the Knights of the Golden Trail start getting very nervous because it starts going up and into the garden and everything. So yeah, I can believe it. That entire area is very, I'm going to sound silly, it's mystical feeling.
It's a lot of that. I mean, and that ties into, it's not too far from Serpent Mound. It's not too far from Alligator Mound. It's you got Right Pat, just a little far, not too far away.
From Fort Ancient.
Yeah, Fort Ancient culture, the Medina, the Hopewell, all that, all right there. And that's what we were realizing when we were doing this book is everything tied so much together. And it's, you start thinking, oh, it's this little triangle. No, it's a little bit bigger. Oh no, it's big. It's the whole damn mountain range, and it goes from Alabama all the way up to Quebec. It's crazy. And then if you really think about it, the Appalachians, before everything split apart, the Scottish Highlands are the same damn mountains geographically, just because of a couple of geological events. So they're weird too. That's where all this stuff comes from. So
yeah, Pangea, man, made such a strange world. Actually, that brings us to basically the Crosswick Snake, which we've talked about because we've had with our anthology 2 different artists and writer teams worked on it. So our listeners are familiar with the Crosswick Snake, but it was interesting because you brought up, and this is very personal, a forgotten memory of mine reading your book. And I was just like, I turned to my husband who I don't want to say tolerates the paranormal stuff, but it's just like, okay, this is your thing. I respect your thing. And I'm like, yes. And so I was freaking out about this. So one of the creatures you bring up is the Crosswick Snake, which I said our listeners are very used to, that 1882 snake, child, doctor, and thing. Yeah. And so that's really brief, points. They chop down the tree, snake gets away. It's seen twice in the preceding years, and then we haven't seen it again since the 1880s. So, but you bring up the Great Lynx mound that is up. It's Alligator Mound now.
Alligator Mound.
Yeah, that's up in Newtown?
Yeah.
Yeah, Newtown, Ohio.
Right in that area, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I can't remember if they pronounce it Newtown or Newton. That was just me.
It just depends on who you talk to. Yep.
Yeah. Which I went up there to write about their Old Licking County Jail, which is super duper haunted.
Super haunted, yep.
Yeah, and talk to the caretakers then, and I did not have enough time to go visit these mounds because I love me some Fort Ancient mounds. Anyway, that can be taken weird. I'm gonna move on from that. So, it was kind of fun because you're writing and you have a wonderful outline of the Alligator Mound, which with explanation that anthropologists and Native American sociologists now don't believe it's an alligator. They believe it's actually an image of the Great Lynx, which is Mishi Peshtu, and talking about then the water panther or the underwater panther. And I'm like, okay, I'm reading about this. I'm like, I grew up in northern Indiana in a town called Mishawaka, which is a Potawatomi name. Yeah. And Potawatomi, we have the Pokagon band of Potawatomi is native to my area. And one of the places that I grew up in, every summer I would go up to a camp called Red Bud, which is on the banks of the St. Joe River. And it's not too far away from the Pokagon band's actual headquarters, which is in Dowagiac, Michigan. This is Buchanan, Michigan. And we would have the Pokagon would do powwows and come teach the kids, like, this is our culture. These are our stories. And they would tell us about something that got a little butchered in my youth. They called it the tiger shark of the St. Joe River. And and they're like, it had a fearsome head like a panther's, and then it had scales and mighty claws, and then a long tail and body, and it swims on the water and it causes drownings and it does all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, that sounds terrifying. I'm never swimming in the St. Joe River. And to this day, I still have it. And they give offerings when they go canoeing and all that stuff. And I'm reading it and I'm reading your book and I go, oh my God, they're talking about the underwater panther.
Yep.
And I will say in Potawatomi, it's Nabeja is how they pronounce it in that particular area. But I was just like, found memory. I had completely forgotten about this story, and they didn't highlight it as a ghost story. They're just like, this is a part of our culture. This is a creature or an entity that is both positive and negative. It brings good things, it brings bad things, and it fights the Thunderbirds. And I was just like, wow. So that is my own little personal story of a found memory from your book that I enjoyed a lot. So thank you for writing about that.
Oh, no problem. And that's just it. It's one of those things. It's like the Crosswick Serpent, nobody associates it with the underwater panther. But when you read the descriptions, Mishipishu is exactly the Crosswick Serpent. I mean, it's almost identical. It's like maybe a mini version, of it, because it's got the swirly tail, it's got the strange claws, it's got the weird head. And, and so suddenly is this legendary beast not only a legendary beast, is it a mythological that is no longer mythological? Is this now a real creature that existed? And so they called it this. I mean, I love that basically, the early settlers in the area, came in and they said, what is this mound? And the natives told them, oh, this is the great beast that lives in the water and eats our people. And it has a spiky tail and, and they go, oh, that's an alligator. And you're like, and they're like, no, it's Mishipishu. Well, it's our word for it's alligator. So trust us, just call it an alligator. Okay. And so the natives, the reason it's called Alligator Mound, racism. Yeah. So, so when they all died out,
and then mansplaining, it's racism and mansplaining.
Yep. And then the new people move into the area and go, what's this mound? What's this strange creature? Oh, those people who lived here, they called it Alligator Mound, and they insisted it was an alligator. It's like, no, they didn't. And it's like the Serpent Mound is the Great Serpent Mound. It's not the serpent eating the apple from Eden like the original white men thought it was. It's the Great Serpent, the creature under the water, under the earth, and then the leader of the underworld. And then, and so, it's funny how those all three match. And then suddenly Crosswick, which is just a short distance from there. Did they not know about this monster? Of course they might have known about this monster, and and they would have been worshiping it because this is a giant dinosaur. They didn't describe it as a dinosaur. They didn't describe it. They called it a snake with legs. I mean, come on. And Kari had so much fun drawing that one. So
yeah,
I think Claudius posed for that one a little bit though, because it definitely has a Claudius head. So
yeah, it was just remarkable, and all of them. There's a shared culture running throughout all of that. Because you have the Fort Ancient and the Hopewell and Adena cultures, and that goes into the Odawa and the Ojibwe and Potawatomi and Algonquin a lot, and it just keeps going. So Yeah, it was a wonderful. I liked it. I really love how you incorporated First Nation and Native American stories, because those are really needing to be. They explain a lot, and especially in this area and around Appalachia, they're everywhere. Like, I live 10 minutes away from a Fort Ancient mound that they built a water tower on top of in Norwood, Ohio, which is, it kills me every time I look at that water tower and I'm like, you couldn't have made it 300 feet the other any direction. No, you just had to put it on the mound. You had to ruin all of that. But that's
down
just
here
me
in
getting
Florida,
angry.
we just bulldozed the mounds, so it, it was they
Yeah.
were used as landfill for for everything, and and
Yeah.
the Tierra Verde is all paved. Was the original paving stones were just stuff they pulled out of the shell middens, which was nuts. So and it's no, all the native stuff I have to cater to my I cater to my I seek out the help of local experts and native experts, usually. Outgoing back, the Bram Stoker winning author, who is a good friend of mine. He's who helps me with all the Seminole legends down here, and he helps me reach out to the various, tribal influences that I need to talk to who can help me. And Sally Gage helped me with reaching out to some of the Ojibwa Nation and stuff like that. So that's how I was able to get so much on that. Plus, we have a lot of anthropology friends up in the university system that help us out too. So
yes, they're always happy to talk about it.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So now let's get to some of the holler stories.
Yes.
I really loved
so
that.
much fun with.
Yeah, I read through all Mothman and Loveland Frogman. I'm like, but then you get into the more personal stories of all the little hollers and the individual culture within each one of them that would bring around this creature. So, and you describe very quickly about the mouth house in a holler, and then all the not outhouses, not like that. They were the houses on the outskirts that would be along basically the forest line. And if you could, for our listeners, describe a little bit of how the demographics of a holler work, basically.
Okay, so what a holler is a hollow or a valley for those of us who aren't from that area. And I grew up in one, so this is kind of how it works. Is that basically you have the mouth of the holler, which is where the road meets the main land, and then you're going to go down into this little valley, usually along a creek, or just the way the road goes back to whatever was back there. And so the mouth of the holler is kind of the public face, and the people who live in that house are the ones who are the eyes. They're also the public facing, so they're watching. They see when some strange car comes down that they don't recognize. They're the ones who call down the road and say, hey, we need to, keep what's this? Is anybody expecting company? And then, but it's also this thing about holler life is that everybody looks out for each other, in this holler. If somebody hasn't been seen for a couple days, we go over and check on them. And, if one of them's sick, we're going to go take care of their dogs. We're going to go take care of their land and, feed and water the horses. It's just everybody helps each other in this holler. And it's not just family. It usually is one or two families. But when somebody moves in to that area within a generation, you're part of the family and you're portion. So like the secondary people are the ones that, okay, it's a government guy, so let's let the bigger dogs out. It's whatever. We don't need these people hanging around. But then in the back, it's the back of the holler, the bunk, the get out, they call it, or the bunker. That's where
bug out, I think, is what's used.
Yeah, Meemaw and Peepaw live and all that. Yeah, and Mama and Papa, and depending on what valley you're in, and they're the ones who not only are the safe place, but they're also the place with all the storage in case the storm comes, and they're the place with the shelter. They're the place with the tornado bunker. They've usually got the bigger barn so that all the animals can get put in there in the whole valley if we need to. But they're also the ones that are the keepers of the tales, and also the keepers of the secrets, and also the keepers of, hey, we need to leave an offering for the wild man, and so we put the honey out for him. We put the peanut butter out for him. We feed the bear, in the cave nearby. We feed him so that they don't come ramaging for other things. They've all got their little, things. And if you get into a holler and you're accepted, you will never be more welcome and never be more loved than living in that area, in that community. But also they're kind of not welcoming of outsiders for the most part, because this is the way we are. But thanks to us doing this, is like, the problem is so many of these little stories and these little things are going away. The mamas and papas are dying off. And the kids of today are, they're playing on,
They're
the
not
phones.
staying in the holler.
Yeah, and they're moving out and going to get jobs elsewhere and all that.
Mhm.
So these stories are disappearing. Ooh, there's Minnie Lightning, our voodoo queen of St. Petersburg, bringing the thunder.
Yeah, we've got quite a storm going.
It's less than a category 1. We don't care.
Yeah.
In Florida, if it's not category 5, even then, as long as they're keeping the Waffle House open, we're fine.
Yeah.
I
I have family in Oklahoma.
We're all
I
gone.
know.
Yeah,
Mhm.
with that. But yeah, no, it's so it was. I was getting emails from when I reached out to groups, and I'd be like, "Hey, I'd like to know your stories. I want to claim these stories. I want to protect these stories, because that's what we do. Is a lot of these stories, if even stuff we wrote about in Eerie has been bulldozed. That's just 5 years from Eerie, Florida. So it's like, and it's gone now. But we were one of the last things to document it. So I wanted to make sure I documented these legends and these folklore legends. And I had a holler monster of my own that was part of my family that, thankfully, over the last few generations, my nephews and nieces and I have restored it to familiarity.
Have they seen it?
One has. Now I've got several cousins who have seen it, my generation.
Okay, so we brought this up. We shouldn't really tease it too much. It was, I'm going to be honest, my favorite story out of the entire book.
Oh, yay.
Yes,
Yay.
and it's, I just loved it because it was a personal experience, and you knew the area well and could explain it. So, I know it's not the snarly gaster, but if you could just talk about the bench leg, please.
The bench leg of Goebbel Ridge. It sounds like something out of South Park, right?
It kind of does.
Yeah, it's growing up hearing this story of a creature that's on our family land in Kentucky, and it has the body of a cow, a small cow, or a large cat. It's very dark, and it has a misshapen head that maybe looks humanish, but kind of glows. And then it has a wooden leg, and it sits up in treetops. And if you ride under it on your horse, it'll whoop you in the head with its whoop ass stick, and that it's its leg and knock you off. It's the craziest story, right? And as a kid, I want monster stories. I want ghost stories. What the hell is this stupid creature that my dad is trying to tell me is scaring everybody and haunting this this whole holler? And it made no sense. And
it's a fantastic beast. Let me just say that.
Totally. But then, as you grow older, as I was a kid, we're out spending the nights down there, and I brought my friends from Charleston, the city, over to Louisa, which is middle of nowhere. And the adults had the big trailer had cable and fans and electricity and all that. And we had this old Airstream we had salvaged from the 60s and chased all the snakes out of it. And reclaimed it, and it would be our place to hide down a mile away from the rest of the family. And I'd have a couple friends there, and I had a BB gun and they didn't. So it was like, all right, I'm safe. Never mind, there was bears and tons of other things on that property. But it was the 70s. Nobody cared. As long as you came back in the morning and they found us and we weren't dead. Yeah, it was a win. So I can't imagine that now. But anyway, we were camping out down there one night, and we heard hoofbeats, and I'm thinking, oh, it's one of the horses in the nearby field is into our land. That happens. And then a second one came by, and I'm like, okay, something spooked the horses. I knew there were only 2 horses. Then I hear more movement, and I'm thinking, is that a deer? Is it what else has been stirred up? Is maybe there is a bear. So cock my little BB gun. I'm ready to scare the hell out of whatever big monster's coming to get us. And my friends are wishing they had BB guns standing next to me. And suddenly I see something I can't explain. It's a dark shape with it was a glow about its head. It was ugly. I couldn't tell if it was humanish. I swear I kept trying to see if it had a wooden leg. But it loped off into the woods. I can't explain it. It could have just been a big cat with some foxfire. I don't know. And it stuck with me. And so there's, my bench leg encounter. So it stuck with me. And as growing up, loving monsters, running our own haunted house, I always kept the bench leg in the back of my head. And suddenly I find an article in an old 1700s paper near our land where a peddler had been killed on that road by brigands. It was an old paper, so it wasn't bandits or robbers. And he had resisted with a stick, a stout stick. And they had covered up the murder by killing his cow on top of his body. So suddenly it's a ghost story.
Yeah.
A vengeance spirit. And it makes sense. And is it a cryptid? Is it a paranormal?
Yeah.
It's a Halloween monster. And that's what they all blend into. They all fiddle with
Is
that.
it a tulpa? Because it's an interesting blend of both the peddler and his ox. So yeah. And I do like how there are a lot more stories that are more of what would be like a chimera type entity. In world history, there's a lot more of those than you'd find in North America, in particular to the white settler stories. But as we just talked about with Native American and First People stories, there's a lot more of it. Not saying that bench leg is tied to that, but saying there's this
Wampus cat and
Wampus
the white
cat
fang and all that. Those are all just like that. Little variations on a theme.
Yeah. So it almost sounded like a Wampus cat, but it's like grouchy old man cat.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly if it had come from a different, my family is, German, Scottish, and Romanian, Romani. So that's why it became the bench leg, it's, our version of it. I'm sure the German name for it was probably something closer and it just translates as bench leg. It's like Snallygaster is Schnellegeist, which is fast ghost, fast spirit. So suddenly Snallygaster, it's, that's the words get corrupted. And so I'm sure bench leg is something, I don't know what the original German would have been for it, but I would love to find out.
Yeah,
I'm hoping more research on that will eventually turn up things.
Yeah. So Kari, how difficult was it? How many times did you have to draw bench leg to get it right?
A couple times, because I was like, okay, so it's a small cowy body. It's kind of got a man head. And he'd be like, no, it's uglier. It's more misshapen. I was like, okay, all right, got to make this more ugly.
Yeah, I think the first one was actually kind of cute and very Pokemon. And I'm like, no.
Oh, a bench leg Pokemon would be fun. I'm looking it up right now because I remember just flipping through the stories, and it was. I'm not going to show it because one, it would be terrible with my camera. But I remember it flipped open, and I'm just like, what am I looking at? And then I had to read it. I went out of order because usually start at the beginning of the book, read through. No, I went out of order. I'm like, I have to know what this is.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
It was it's one of those. What's fun is my nephew. He opened a hair salon in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Yeah.
And
I was like, there's one Kalamazoo. So
yeah. I always have to explain people where it is though, because everybody says Kalamazoo. Is that in another country? No.
It just feels like it.
It feels like it. Yeah. But
I
anyway,
personally attest. Yeah.
He decided he's a big fan of the bench leg stories and all that. So he brought a bench leg beard cream to the audience for a Halloween special one year, and had Kari do the art for the jar. that's like one of his best sellers every Halloween. So it's a limited edition. Watch for it. So
Oh, I
Samson's
like
Hair
that.
Care. Adam, there's your plug. You owe me $1. All right.
Yeah, I love it. It looks like Walter Matthau's head has been put onto an ox with a plank leg.
Yep.
And
Like I said,
that's
We'll
the
out of
definitely
South
be
Park,
showing
right?
this. We'll definitely be showing this.
Oh,
in the
yes.
final. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll get to see the picture. If not, get the book.
Delightfully grouchy. Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we did. I'm finding we had a nice throwaway into another story. Oh, vengeance! That was it. To Screaming Jenny.
Screaming Jenny. Now, so
Yeah.
this is my
Sorry.
favorite story because it started as a. Now there are a couple Screaming Jennies throughout the Appalachians,
Mhm.
and I was looking up one near Harper's Ferry that was killed by a railroad train, and yeah, so it's a famous screaming ghost, and then I was reaching out to people about it, and suddenly I get this email from completely on the other end, down in Alabama, from a family and a lady who is related to an Aunt Jenny,
Mm.
and who was known as a ghost called Screaming Jenny later. And her story was amazing. Apologize. But anyway, her story was amazing about her aunt. And then I start looking her up and I realized she's this folk hero, right on par with the Greenbrier ghost up in West
Mhm.
Virginia, as this famous legendary character. And the more I read about her, the more I fell in love with her. And she was born in Kentucky, and Jane Louisa, and she married a man named Willis Brooks, and she was, every description of her is described as this most beautiful young girl with it was half Cherokee, so she had all the dark features but with striking blue eyes. And everybody just talks about how beautiful her eyes are. And she's 14 and she marries Willis Brooks, who's 20 years her senior, but it was common at the time. And from what I understand,
Gross.
they were very happy because
Yeah.
they had 9 kids.
Whoa.
And they
Oh my
moved
goodness.
to Alabama. God bless her, 9 kids. So she's in her 20s with 9 kids.
Oh.
And he's in his 40s, and the Civil War breaks out. And they're in
It just
North
gets
Alabama.
worse.
Yeah. Oh, this is a
It just
trail.
gets worse.
This is a trail that you will enjoy. I promise you. It pays off in the end. So in North Alabama, they're kind of at that point where Alabama didn't really care about the Civil War at that point. This was the second year of the war. It was a rich man's war and the poor man's fight, and they didn't want a part of it. It was, rich people could get out of the war by paying $300 to have somebody else fight for them. They didn't have to get drafted if they had more than 30 slaves. So, the poor people just didn't care, right? They're like, we're kind of, this is kind of neutral zone area.
Mm-hmm.
But, and Jenny's husband, Willis, he kind of was outspoken against the South. And so the Confederate Guard, which were basically the tax collector / police force, the guys who were too old to fight in a war, but too young to be drafted, they would enforce, what they thought was the right laws. And so they went to Willis's inn that he and Jenny were running with their kids and said, all right, you're coming with us to war. And he said, no, I'm too old. And they're like, well, we're taking your son. Well, he's too young. My oldest son is too young. And like, well, one of you's coming. And so he fights back. And so they decide they're going to hang him. And then the oldest son can't let his dad get hung. So he goes and grabs a gun and he runs outside. They shoot the boy dead. And then they shoot the dad dead and made the family watch. And then they ride off. Now, Jane, she, rather than just being overwhelmed with grief, she grabs her children and she embraces that Cherokee heritage, and she has them all put their hands on the blooded wounds. And then she makes all of her children swear a Cherokee blood oath that none of them will rest till the killers of the family are brought to justice. She begins to train her kids. These are young kids. And she raises them as gunmen and fighters and tough guys. She has them join gangs and become the toughest guys in the West. They join law enforcement and become some of the most famous lawmen in history. The Brooks gang becomes, they get in a feud with another family that it rivals the Hatfields and McCoys. They actually work on the sides of the Hatfields and McCoys on both sides of the battle at different times as gunmen, and they hunt down several of the men. Of the 8, they get 7. Jenny herself gets 2 of them. She goes by the name Aunt Jenny now, and she gets married again and has 10 more kids after her trail of vengeance has kind of run its course.
That's a lot of kids.
19 kids. She lives to be 98. 98 at this time.
Like a superwoman.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, how is she not everybody America's hero, right?
Yeah.
But all of her kids from their original marriage eventually died off in various gunfights and battles. One of her sons famously was in a gunfight with 20 men, and she was so proud because he took out 6. And she's like, they all died with their boots on. No, they all went out like men. No one ever gave our family any crap anymore. We took nothing from nobody. Famously, one of her lines is, "I wasted many a keg of powder teaching them boys how to shoot, but it was well worth it." Wow. So anyway, on her deathbed, she's in her homestead in Alabama, and she's on her deathbed, and she asks the priest to bring her soap dish that she had made years ago, handmade, so that she could wash away her sins. She's just done. It's time. And he brings her the dish, and she washes her hands, and then she expires, goes away. And as the priest is carrying the soap dish away, he realizes it's this odd shape, and he realizes she's made it out of the skull of the man she killed, the first one. So how badass do you have to be on your deathbed to demand the soap dish skull of the man you killed?
Wow,
So
that is
metal.
One got away, and that is why she is now Screaming Jenny, the ghost that haunts the Appalachian Trail to hunt these men. She's hunting the last one, or the descendant of the last one, and she's a banshee with her bright blue eyes and a dark shape and that scream. But if you go out this crazy logging trail in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, you can go to her grave. Her tombstone been stolen many times over the years, so they finally put this giant slab there, and people leave offerings for her with names of people they would like her to take care of.
Whoa.
I need to go see her. I'm a Jenny, man. I can relate.
Very Robert the Doll-esque,
That is amazing.
Yeah. So if you're out there, you can Google her and find out where she is. But I got to talk to one of her nieces or grandnieces, and that's where I learned this whole story firsthand.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
And it's incredible. And I hope that, talk about documentary waiting to happen. Right? Or at least 6-part Netflix series. Come on.
That feels like a historical drama period piece that needs to be made.
Yeah.
I was going to say the beginning sounded like The Patriot, right?
Very similar story.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, then it didn't.
It goes a different direction.
It goes this.
Yeah. No, that does feel like it should be a historical drama piece.
And there's
for Netflix.
Pictures of her, at 98 years old before she died, and you can find the family had records of her and everything, which is amazing. I loved her quotes. Just some of that family history is just gold. So
yeah. So still on the paranormal true crime, we mentioned the Greenbrier ghost not that long ago. I thought Jen would love this one. Jen, this story is for you.
You don't know the Greenbrier ghost?
No, you can tap the Screaming can Jenny.
I don't know if I'm Screaming Jenny, but this one has actual documentation that rivals anything. So
yes,
wow.
Okay. This is a court case where ghost testimony was used.
Yes, Zona Hester Shue was another beautiful young bride and she was in the area of Greenbrier, West Virginia, and she died tragically. A young boy comes in, sees her, on the ground. She's, dead.
She's in front of her staircase, just splat.
Right at the bottom of the staircase.
Just like the staircase.
Yep.
Except for no owls.
Yep. So he runs to town to get the husband, and the husband is so distraught. He gets there and he's holding her. The doctor shows, and he's doing the investigation, and the husband is so sad he just won't let go of the bride, won't let go. And so the doctor's like, was it a long faint? Was the description, which would have been heart attack, we would have called it. But then, so they're prepping the body for immediate burial. As the husband's like, she insisted on immediate burial, and he puts this fancy scarf around her. It was her favorite scarf, and he won't leave her side. The family all comes to view the body, and the husband just refuses to leave the head of the body, standing right there, just so distraught.
And the scarf is around the neck.
Scarf very tightly wrapped around the neck. So she's buried, and life goes on. Until the ghost shows up to her sister's house. Zona shows up and says, "My husband strangled me. I did not die like this." Wow. And please, you've got, and his name is Trout. And she's, what? His name is completely different. So turns out he had an assumed name and had a previous marriage where he was named Trout, and his previous wife had died tragically while they were fixing a chimney, and a rock had slipped out of his hands and fell on her head. It's this guy's a winner. And he had a previous marriage.
Could have happened to anyone.
Could have happened to anybody. He had a previous marriage before that had died tragically. So this guy, a little unlucky in love.
He should have been named Butterfingers.
So they go to the to the legal offices, and the prosecutor's like, I can't base things on a ghost, and all this. But they're like, well, can you look up his name? And it was finding that name that they were able to go, okay, he has a previous marriage and strange circumstances. So they were allowed to dig up the body. And he was protesting that like crazy, And finally, famously, he's quoted as saying, well, even if you do find anything, you can't prove it was me. Ooh. Great quote.
In other words, I did it.
Yeah. So anyway, they find that she was strangled, and so he is sent to jail, and they famously say it was not the ghost that sent him to jail. It was the fact that he had an assumed name, and we figured it out. No,
but you
totally
get
the
there
ghost
without the ghosts.
Exactly. They would never even looked into it if it hadn't been the ghost story.
Yep.
So she has a marker that's a historical marker on the road, and then it's a short distance from her grave, and you can go visit her grave, and people leave her, markings as well, as tributes, because she's the one that got vengeance, and a legal precedent for a ghost causing the solving of her own murder.
Yep.
So she's a folklore hero in West Virginia because, hey, abused women everywhere would love to be able to do that. So
that's an awesome story.
Yeah,
I know, those are
I
all
right.
right.
Jen.
It's a beautiful grave too, and it's up behind I forget, it's something Soul Cemetery. Is the church is something Soul, and it's up in the middle of the mountains, and we were there in the fall, and it was just beautiful. It was, everything you can expect.
Yeah, road trip. How close is it? Is Trans-Allegheny in the same state? I can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, Trans-Allegheny's not far. It's over
road trip.
Trans-Allegheny is nice because it's up to almost the Panhandle, and you can head from there over to Wizard Clip and all the other fun out that way. But
I'm stealing
she's
the name
closer
Wizard.
She's pretty close to Flatwoods and Sutton in Braxton County. So that's a little closer to that. And, so like you can do the Mothman Flatwoods and then head up to Greenbrier and then go see Dave Spink's World of Weird right there in Richmond, which is right there too.
I smell a paranormal road trip this fall.
Yes.
What's before?
Yes.
They're travel guides.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I've kept you on for an hour and 20 minutes straight talking about everything. So I'm going to let Christina and Jen ask some questions and definitely dive into some of the illustrations in this book. So.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I was wondering, Kari, when drawing this, it seems like, do you find it more interesting to did you look at much art that other people had done of these cryptids, or did you try to just read the descriptions and come up with your own thing?
It depends a little bit. Like some things, the descriptions are really vague. Sometimes I like to see how other people interpreted it and then be like, nope, they're wrong. Because usually, like, I actually come back around to what natural creature is this most like, and I kind of try to assemble it based on natural things rather than referring to other people's drawings. So yeah, I try to start with the description, try to interpret what this person actually saw, because sometimes that's a little difficult. And you can't go back and talk to a lot of these people and
not easily
try to compare accounts and see where they overlap and where they differ, and then just try to break it down from there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's kind of an exciting aspect of it, because you can put your own theories and ideas on it. It kind of makes me think of how the way dinosaurs are depicted is based very much on those first illustrations.
Yeah.
And now they're finding out they were all wrong.
Yes. That's why I do put a little bit of me into it, because I'm like, this is all perspective. So I think I get to put a little of my perspective in there too.
I mean,
so what mediums did you use to do these illustrations?
I primarily use water-soluble pencil. I am a big fan. I think it's called Crown Dash company stuff. But they have a set of water-soluble graphite pencils that are just nice. So I'm just such a pencil person. Like, I'm not big on color, and the books were going to be black and white anyway, so I just went with that.
That's amazing. And one question I had about, like, talking about Appalachia, do you think a lot of where you were talking about the holler and a lot of this cultural mythology, is any of it from, like, some of the stuff where you were talking about leaving milk out and stuff, is that kind of old Celtic legend? Like, some of these people, their families came and did things like they did to placate the fairies and the...
I feel like we definitely, it's almost American Gods, where we kind of brought,
yes, that's exactly what I thought was American Gods.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, and you can holler by holler, depending which immigrants came to that area.
Their ancestry.
Yeah, it's you can tell they have different things, like leaving out a pie on the sill was, you had one for you and one for the forest, and and then and you would leave the fresh apples over to the side, and then you would leave the and then there was one that was, they left the fermented stuff over to the side because it wasn't for personal use, that was for the folk of the forest. A lot of it was Bigfoot related, was very much, they would call him the old man of the woods, or the big guy was one. I loved one family just called him the big guy. They didn't call him Bigfoot, they called him the big guy. And for him, they left out bacon. He liked bacon, so I was like, cooked, and they're like, no, just strips of bacon. We would leave it out and it would go away, and anything could eat it, but they knew it was the big guy was eating it. So and that's and it really depended on the valley. Some were so unusual and crazy that I'm like, where the hell did this come from? Because this doesn't match anything that I can think of. There was a lot of Romani from Romania, and other areas that I noticed, which is some of my family heritage. So that was fascinating to see that had traveled up and down the Appalachian Trail. So
Yeah.
Very cool.
Actually, I did forget to talk about the snallygaster.
Hey,
we
there's
mentioned
always
it earlier.
room. There's
but
always room for that.
yeah,
I
just real
love him
quickly.
so much, just because it is this strange story. My favorite thing about anything is whenever I can work Teddy Roosevelt into a story. I mean, he's a Tampa boy. He came to Tampa. He burned down a bordello here, so that became part of Hellview history.
Yeah.
Because a couple of his men went missing there, and we turned that from dusk till dawn. Can you imagine Teddy Roosevelt fighting vampires? That would have been amazing. I'm still going to make that movie at some point.
Forget Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, exactly. But Teddy actually did that kind of stuff. But anyway, the snallygaster is this crazy creature that is known as the Quicks ghost. It's got a snake-like flying creature, maybe a thunderbird, because some of the descriptions got weird wings, but it definitely has like tentacles out of its mouth, metallic parts, robotic parts. Some of the descriptions, very steampunk-esque. And then this thing was so famous and people saw it so many times, and it kept coming back every so often, like every 10 years, it would re-show back up, like was hatching and a new one would come. And there were reports of it sitting on giant eggs and trying to hatch the next round. And the Smithsonian offered $1 million reward. This is 1910. Offered $1 million. That's never heard of. Would have been $1,000 for anything else. Teddy Roosevelt decides to postpone a important diplomatic mission because he wants to go hunt the thing. Napoleon's nephew shot it with a cannonball and it bounced off, and he famously bragged. So that was when Teddy Roosevelt's like, "What? We can't have that. I've got to fight this thing. I'll take it down." So it became kind of a joking creature, but people saw it. People saw these strange things, and it was out of Maryland, but then it was seen as far into West Virginia. It was seen into Virginia. It was seen up into Jersey. It was seen all the way into Ohio, and it would fly and just grab people and pick them up. Famously, did kill a person, and they couldn't figure out what killed him. He was dropped from a great height.
What year was this?
This was this would have been early 1900s.
Wow.
And they found him in a field, and they claimed the snallygaster got him, and he had been drained of blood. So now, some UFOologists say that he was abducted, and it was like a cattle mutilation thing, because there were several cattle found near him that were also drained of blood. So that's why this thing, the snake tentacles that come out of its mouth, drain you of blood. So suddenly I'm thinking Tremors, and stuff like that, but flying. Yeah. So it's this crazy story, and then it just dies off, just disappears out of history. And so was it just sensational newspapers? Probably, to an extent. I think it's a holler monster story that just went crazy, that that got around, and just happened to tie in with some other unusual sightings. It could have been a Crosswick. It could have been a Thunderbird. It's one of those. It kind of fits a little bit of several descriptions. So, but we love him because he's just so unique.
How did they come up with that name?
It's German for the original German immigrants called it the Schnellegeist, which meant fast spirit,
like a poltergeist,
right.
Like a poltergeist,
yes.
but with more tentacles.
Yeah, with more Cthulhu. Yeah. So and out of Arkham, Massachusetts, maybe. So who knows?
Wow.
With 20% more tentacles.
And that would have been about the time
draw.
H.P. Lovecraft was a young kid reading newspaper articles. So,
Christina, you should. That would with some mechanical steampunk parts.
Oh yeah. Cool. This sounds. I mean, Kari, this sounds like a really fun project to draw.
That one was complicated because it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And Spring Hill Jack is right around that area. So we didn't put him in the book, but it was around that same time frame. So it was like, okay, so steampunk was kind of a thing, even though it wasn't called steampunk back then. But so that may be where the scales turned into clockwork and stuff like that. But who knows? It's a fascinating story. So
I would think the interesting thing illustrating this stuff too is so much, having, you have written horror and science fiction, and so much of the imagery has an iconography that you recognize. So when you're looking at a creature that doesn't have like a typical, would you say, type, it means when you look at it, it's what you described. I don't know what I'm looking at. Where you said the one with the peg leg, and you look at this collection of things and it doesn't resolve into something you recognize.
Yeah, it's like one of those artist keyword challenges to just put these things together.
Yeah.
I admit that's a drawing exercise I do with my students, where we do
yeah.
creature design, and I'll put up like 3 very different animals and say, make a creature with these in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You can do that. You can do that. I mean, you can do that alone with Mothman. That was one of the things, Kari, I challenged her, because there's so many people draw Mothman a very specific way. And we went back to the original sightings and said, look, it's completely different than what everybody draws, because everybody's so influenced by the movie. Everybody's so influenced by some of the more recent, because they're influenced by the movie, they make it just big eyes and, the big wings. But when you go back to those original descriptions, it's basically a flying Sasquatch with a sunken head. And he's muscular, and he's ripping his wings caught in barbed wire. The first sighting of it, his wing is caught in barbed wire, and he's using muscular arms to rip his wing free. Nowhere is that in any drawing. Nowhere is that in anything. It's actually kind of closer to that strange statue that represents him out in Point Pleasant.
That's at the end of the book.
Oh yes, we had to put that at the end of the book, because as I was writing the book, I would turn on Mothman Cam every day just to watch it, and just count how many people touch Mothman's butt.
Yeah.
And it's because that statue, it's he's got an 8-pack, and he's got buns of steel, literally. So you watch, and it's so funny because you'll see everybody come out, do the selfie up front, and then they'll walk around the back, and then they'll smile, they'll point, and then they'll selfie with the butt, or they'll touch the butt. And it's just and so I fought with the publisher. I'm like, this has to be the last picture. I'm like, well, we had one other one that was a backup, and that's from the book, the Bigfoot Museum in Georgia, because we do a whole section of the book on Bigfoot, and we don't talk about it much tonight, but that's fine because everybody talks about Bigfoot. But we do a big section on all the different Bigfoot throughout the mountains. But in Georgia, there's the Bigfoot Expedition Bigfoot. There's this giant museum dedicated to all things Sasquatch. It's amazing. And they have prints and casts of all the footprints and everything.
Wow.
But most famously, they have Bigfoot's butt print from where he sat down somewhere. So that was going to be the backup picture if we didn't get permission. We still snuck that one in the book too. So
yeah.
But
that's awesome.
We ended with the end. Yeah.
I loved it. This was such a wonderful book to read through. Mark, you did a good job with all the history and all of the field work, and Kari, you did a wonderful job with all the illustrations.
Thank you.
So, can you tell our listeners where they can get your book?
You can find it at bookstores everywhere. You can find all of our books. In Florida, you can find them at every CVS, Walgreens, and Cracker Barrel. Our publisher puts us everywhere.
That's really good distribution.
Yeah. Oh man, History Press loves us and puts us everywhere. So we're hoping we'll start hitting the Cracker Barrels up along the Appalachian Trail here, and all up and down 75 and 95. But in the meantime, if you can't you find us in your local stores. You can order us at any of the usual online homes, but you can order direct from us at EerieFlorida.com. or EerieTravels.com gets to us too. And Kari will be happy to draw a little something in there, and I'll be happy to write a little something in there for you.
Yes.
And that way you can get it direct from the horse's mouth, as it were. Yeah. And that's probably the easiest way to find us.
Yeah. And I know we did not talk about the Kirkbride Asylums.
Oh,
even though it was on our list of discussions.
Whole section in there on that.
It's a whole beautiful section on that. So if we happen to make a ghost hunt reservation at one Kirkbride Asylum known as Waverly Hills. Would you be interested in joining us there?
We would be happy to. We have family up in the area. We can go hang out with them a little bit and then make a side trek over with y'all. And happy to go visit some of the friendly ghosts we met up there in the past. So
That would be awesome.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
yeah, you can do the key is to do the sweep, right? You do Waverly,
Yes.
you do Trans Allegheny, you do Penhurst, and and then there's a couple others that you could hit along the way. And then if you're really fun, you go over to Athens and hit the Ridges,
Yes.
which is now part of the university system. So it's
Mhm.
actually it's nice and restored, but you can still go up into that attic and check out that stain.
Yeah.
Which is fun. Another
Yeah,
story
it's-
for another time.
Yeah, it's restored, but it's still spooky from what I hear. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, and what
our
are your
honor.
socials? Do you have
Yes.
social media that we can follow?
Yeah, at Eerie, Florida, and at Eerie Travels. That's generally all of our stuff. And Kari has some of her own.
I don't post enough.
I mean, we
We'll
have a
put 'em in
lot
the
of
show notes.
illustrators
Yeah,
that
yeah,
listen. So
yeah. She's as you can tell, she's very much the teller to my pen. So she lets me do all the talking. And she's like ghost kryptonite. Everything weird happens to me, and we'll be in these weird places, and unusual things will be happening. And Kara will be over taking a picture of a butterfly on a tombstone, and
I'm very oblivious.
and just ignore. So hopefully, at some point the door opens, but we'll see.
yes, come ghost hunting with us.
Yes.
The ghosts see me and go, "Oh yay, fresh meat." That's all just
Oh man, I was listening to some of your earlier stuff with the doppelganger. I was like,
oh, that story. Yeah, you need to come up and visit that place sometime. Yeah,
If
let us
Skyline
know
Philly
whenever
is
you're in the
involved, I'll be
neighborhood.
there, so.
Yeah, it's that was a story. Yes.
Too bad we couldn't have bought that building.
Yeah,
Oh
right.
yeah.
Yeah, the
Always
Saddamsville
glory.
Rectory's for sale.
Mhm.
Is it been sold already?
Oh, I don't know.
I wasn't following it.
I wasn't either. It just would have. I just thought it would have been cool to have.
Yeah.
Dave
Yeah.
Spinks from World of Weird in West Virginia. He just bought Widow's Weep. He
Wow.
actually has it now. So that's
Wow.
you haven't talked to Dave. He's a great guy too. And
Oh, look into
he's
that.
my West
Yeah,
Virginia.
definitely.
He's my boots on the ground guy in West Virginia. Helped me out a lot. So
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yes. So, shall I do our social media?
Yes. I think
Okay.
on that note.
Yeah, on that note. So, everyone, thank you for listening. You can follow us at Sin Cabinet Curio on Twitter and at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram. And please send us your hometown haunts from your neck of the woods to hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. And I'm Kat Cloco for Christina Wald and Jen Kohler. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Mark and Kari. Good night and stay spooky. Bye-bye.
Bye.
see you on the other side.